Hello everyone, thank you for joining me today. My name is Michael Weir. I'm a technical marketing engineer for cybersecurity here at Ingram Micro. We are starting a new video series which will hopefully be lengthy and in-depth, assuming people start watching these things, called Cybersecurity 101. And today is our first lesson in that. It's going to be about networking because much of cybersecurity depends on this concept of networking. Quick agenda for today. First is going to be what is networking, because obviously you've heard me say the word a couple of times now, and if we're going to talk about something, we need to know what it is. Second, we're going to talk about how it works at a very, very high level, and then we're going to review what we talked about. So first, let's start at the very beginning. Very good place to start. What is networking? Now, this is my basic definition of this. You're probably not going to find it in a dictionary or anything along those lines, but for me, networking is sending information from one device to another. That can be between a computer and a computer, or it could even be me networking at a conference between me and you. We're sending information back and forth from one device to another. Once again, not going to find that in a dictionary, but that's just a way of thinking about it. The history of networking between computers looks something like this. So in the early days, most computers were at either military or government facilities or research universities. And we're going to say there's three computers for this explanation. There's going to be one in Los Alamos, one in New York, and one in Boston. So a single device to single device was the original point of networking. There was no choices. We would make a hard link from Los Alamos to DC. That hard link was set. If we wanted to change links, we'd have to physically change a connection or something in order to link up to the one that's in New York. The next step after that, because that was obviously very hard to do if you wanted to change which device you were connected to, it was single device to single device still, but now you had multiple choices. So I could choose to take my Los Alamos one and connect it to New York. And then I could say, all right, I'm done there. I could take my Los Alamos one without physically plugging and unplugging the stuff, but just making addressing changes. Now I could connect to Washington, D.C. and back and forth, which at that point makes things exponentially easier. After that comes the ability to go single device to multiple devices simultaneously. So if I have information that I'm saying, is being broadcast or something like that, or if I need information to pull from multiple servers into the spreadsheet that I'm looking at, I can do that. So Los Alamos can pull information from New York and DC simultaneously. Then last is multiple devices to multiple devices simultaneously. Think about this as a World Wide Web where things are being transmitted in all directions all at once, and that is where we are today. For networking, we're talking about connecting multiple devices to multiple devices simultaneously. For those who are visual learners and for those who want a picture of how this thing is working, let's talk about it from a diagram perspective. Now, we're going to look at very, very simple networking. We're going to look at you, the internet, and your coworker, and we're going to take a look at the information going from you to your coworker, and in this example, we're going to use an email that's being sent across the internet from you to your coworker. Now that transmission is what we are going to call networking. So how does networking work? This is a very valid question. First, how does that email go from point A to point B? Now, to describe it, we use a couple of different models. The model we're going to use for all these courses you're going to be taking with me in Cybersecurity 101 is the OSI model. So OSI model is made up of 7 layers, and it's the steps that data goes through to get to the internet. It's older. Layers 5 through 7 are kind of starting to blend together in a lot of modern applications. But when people talk about cybersecurity, they're going to talk about things like Layer 4 security and Layer 7 security. So it's worth keeping them broken out in the OSI model. For today's purposes, networking is what we're talking about on layers 1 through 4. Now you notice your little email icon is still there. So when you send something from your device to another device, it goes down the stack like this. It goes from 7 down to 1. So picture your device being at the top and the internet being at the bottom, and that being sent along those lines. Today we're going to talk about layers 4, 3, and 2, which from the perspective of your device, you're going to see them in that order, 4, 3, 2. So let's talk a little bit about how that works and what that looks like. Once again, we're blowing up layers 4, 3, 2 transport network data link. We're just looking at between you and the internet right now. So when you send a message to the internet, it's going to go through layer 765 on your host, on your endpoint device. Technically, layer 4 transport is also determined on your host, which sends it into the network layer, which sends it into the data link layer, which sends it to the internet. If you want to put that in a technical parlance that you would normally talk to people, you're not going to say, I'm having a data link layer problem. I mean, I guess you probably could. But this is what we would call that. So your transport layer is being determined on your host. It's TCP or UDP or a few different other things. We'll get to that later. After that comes your IP address, your MAC address, and then internet. Now, right now, there are some people who know a little more about networking saying that is a gross oversimplification. There's tons of stuff that happens, flipping that back and forth as it goes to the internet and back. I know, If you want to get into that kind of depth, look for something that says Networking 101 or Networking 201, and you can go through that more thoroughly. I'm not going to make that video because, quite frankly, I find that boring. So this is what we're talking about. We're going layers 4, 3, 2, and of course 1 is implied by my arrow. We're going transport network data link, determining on the host, going IP address, MAC address. And then, as I said, as we go from 7 to 1 is on your device, which means on the opposite device it goes 1 through 7. So when it goes across the internet and gets to your coworker, it goes reverse. It goes data link network transport. Or in other words, we're going to determine on host, IP address, MAC address, across layer 1 to the next MAC address, layer 2, IP address, layer 3, determine on the host, layer 4. The email is going across like it's 432, 234. It has arrived on the other side. So looking back at what we're talking about on our OSI model here, the transport layer, as I said, was TCP or UDP. The network layer, layer 3, as I've been saying, is IP addressing. Now, IP addressing is a bunch of, depending on, there's IPv4, there's IP version 6, there's all different ways of doing it. Basically, it's a set of octets that's been assigned to your device in a network to identify its address. Now, when things are in a network layer, they're referred to as packets. You'll hear people when they talk about networking referring to everything as packets, including things that are on layer 2. It's just how people talk. It's not totally accurate, but it's just a shared nomenclature. When we get to layer 2, your MAC addressing, that's called frames. So your packet has been put into a frame with your MAC address and it's sent out across cables. The MAC address is, some people call it the physical or hardware address of your device because it's unique. The MAC address is the address of the networking card in your device. There is no other device theoretically in the world that has the same MAC address as yours. It's a unique identifier. And from there, we get sent out over the internet to this nice process right here, where you've gone from host, IP address, MAC address, IP address determined on host. Now you might say, well, that still looks like the point-to-point network you're talking about in like the second bullet in your history up there. Really, it looks like this. So you're sending out transport network data link, you're sending out to a whole bunch of stuff, and all that stuff is doing the reverse, just like we had your coworker doing there. Something is happening on that. We'll get to something later on. Then it goes back 4, 3, 2, 1 across to you, where it goes 1, 2, 3, 4. You get the message, goes back and forth across. Hopefully you're getting the picture of how this works. Quick review. I know that was a lot of information in a little bit of time. I won't be offended if you watch this video multiple times because it increases my views, spreads my fame. Networking is sending information from one device to another. And these days, modern networking, multiple devices can connect to multiple other devices worldwide. And we describe that process through something called the OSI model. OSI layers 4 through 7 happen on a host device. Layers 1 through 3 happen in a network, though layer 4 being the bridge between 5 and 7, and 1 and 3 refer to that as, generally refer to that as networking layer 2. Layer 1 is your physical layer, like your cables. Layer 2 is your MAC addressing, and we'll get to this later on, but MAC addressing is typically acted on by switches. And layer 3 is the IP addressing, which is technically acted on usually by routers. We'll also get to that later, but there's no layer 1 physical, layer 2 MAC, layer 3 IP. And then we did cover that the OSI model reverses layer order on each side from the other person's perspective. So you see 7 to 1. When the message hits the opposite side, that person sees 1 through 7. They send it back, they see 7 through 1. When the message hits you, they see 1 through 7. If you have any questions, problems, issues, concerns, that sort of thing, feel free to contact me. My name is Michael Weir. You can see my email up on the screen there. It's not so much important in this video, but we'll get to it in future videos. There is a list of all the vendors and the security products they make that are carried here at Ingram Micro, and what you would need to fulfill your various needs in your cybersecurity deployment. That's securitylinecard.com. Any additional information? Ingram Micro does have an Imagine Next site for cybersecurity. This is where you're going to find things about current trends, helpful links, nice little brochures, that sort of thing. And then if you have just general questions, products, issues, that sort of thing, there is cybersecurity@ingrammicro.com is there for you. Thank you very much for listening, and don't forget to realize the promise of technology.